Good afternoon, everyone. We'd like to welcome you to the Coalition for Physician Wellbeing webinar. Today's speaker is Dr. Nicole Swiner. She is a physician, professor, speaker, and author. We had the pleasure of having her join us this past year in Chicago for our annual conference. She spoke for our women physicians, and she also spoke for the general session. And we just love getting to know her there. She's a wonderful person with lots of energy. And I'd just like to tell you a little bit about her background. She was voted one of 10 best doctors in North Carolina. Dr. Swiner is a family physician. She is a 6-time best-selling author, blogger, speaker, wife, and mother in Durham. She is also affectionately known as the Superwoman Complex Expert and has written 2 best-selling books on the topic. She loves taking care of the family as a whole, from the cradle to the grave. Her interests include minority health, women's health, self-care, and female entrepreneurship. She attended Duke University and went to medical school at the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston, South Carolina. She's lived in the Triangle, Durham, North Carolina since finishing residency at UNC Chapel Hill, and continues teaching as an adjunct associate professor with the Family Medicine Department. When she's not treating patients at Durham Family Medicine, she's spending time with her family, planning items for her Superwoman subscription box program, speaking nationally, freelancing for WebMD, and teaching others to self-publish. She has become one of the nation's experts on self-care, imposter syndrome, physician burnout, and well-being. Today, she will be presenting her topic on imposter syndrome and physician burnout. And so I would like to go ahead and have Dr. Swiner start her webinar.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Michelle, for inviting me and helping me out with the technicalities of everything and getting everything planned out. So happy to be with you guys, coming live from quarantine, as most of you probably are, in your homes and or still working, being the soldiers on the front line in the hospitals, caring for our community, our nation, our world during this very tumultuous time with COVID-19. So if you haven't heard it today, I want to let you know that I appreciate you and the work that you are doing. I know that we don't often get the pat on the back that we deserve, but I definitely want to let you know, if you're in the hospital, in the clinic, working in the labs, doing testing, working from home, etc., know that I appreciate you, and you are needed and appreciated. So hopefully you guys are doing well. I'm, working on balancing homeschooling. I have 2 young girls that are here, and so we're trying to keep them involved and engaged. I have a husband that also works from home, so we're trying to figure out whose space is whose, and sticking to our schedules. So I know that we're all kind of in the same boat. What we're going to talk about today is probably a lot of what you've already heard as far as burnout, self-care, all of these things that we deal with and talk about on a regular basis. But I'm going to kind of have, I'm going to put a little twist on it, excuse me, because of the current state of affairs. And so I'll throw in some things that, I'll throw out some things that may not be as pertinent nowadays with the COVID-19 situation, and then throw in some things that I think have been helpful for me and hopefully will be helpful for you in balancing life and work, or integrating work and life as we navigate these very strange waters that we're in right now. So let's get started. I'll bounce back and forth from the slides so you can see my face, but or maybe you can still see my face here. But Michelle will be watching for questions, and throw them out as you will. We'll work them in. Be very laid back and casual. Okay. So as she mentioned, I'm going to talk a little bit about the imposter syndrome and physician burnout, which are 2 of my most favorite topics. And I talked a little bit about this during, excuse me, allergies. Again, dealing with all kinds of stuff. But I talked a little bit about this, particularly the Superwoman complex, during my time in Chicago last year, which was so much fun. And so this works very well and comfortably into the subject of the imposter syndrome, into burnout, because they all kind of interact with each other. So we'll get into that. Okay. So as I mentioned, we'll talk about ways to avoid burnout mentally, physically. Now, even more so with having to be at home for a lot of us, or dealing with patient care during this time of COVID-19, what that means, what that looks like. We'll define what the imposter syndrome is and what historically what the definition was and how it's transitioned into these modern times, how we can defeat it, how we can promote and practice and continue practicing self-care, even if you are working from home, and effective ways to keep sane in these times, and then the methods that I have used personally, both at home and at work, to kind of help things be, quote, more balanced, which we're moving away from more now. We're calling it more integration than balance, because, you know, what is the perfect balance? There may not be. You may have to kind of work things in and out of one another and make it work for you. So burnout, again, this has become a very trendy word along with self-care. You know, if you Google these terms or you search the hashtags on social media, everybody's using this in these terms in different ways. But psychologists, at least these in particular, Davis and Lack, called burnout the disease of disengagement. And it's very important, especially right now with the amount of stress and strain that we all have on our lives, particularly for those in the medical field, to work on being more engaged with yourself, engaged and intuitive with how you're feeling, what you're thinking, the type of self-talk that you're giving yourself, the amount of time that you're really helping yourself to focus on yourself, being selfish. We really should spend more time doing that. So everyone's definition is different. Everyone's solutions are different. You just have to figure out what's best for you. So if you have a moment, if you have a break right now, you know, just kind of take some time and think about, you know, am I practicing true self-care? Am I doing a good job focusing on myself, at least for a little bit, a part of the day, especially if you're like me, working kind of part-time in clinic, part-time at home. I'm at home Mondays and Fridays now doing telemedicine. Who knows what the schedule will change to in the upcoming weeks with the changes of our, you know, lockdowns and quarantines. But it's definitely, now that everybody is at home, meaning my kids, my husband, everybody's here in the house, designating and creating boundaries for my own self-care. So that's been very interesting. It's totally different from working outside and then being able to go outside to do things separate from the family. So very interesting times that we're in. But really take a moment today, either while we're having this discussion or afterwards, and just sit and maybe even make a list. You know, am I truly practicing self-care, and what can I do to do those things better for myself? Okay. Excuse me. Another psychologist's definition includes things like, I've highlighted some of the important words here in this definition of burnout: stress, access, support, advice, feedback, and control. All of these words are very important to this definition because clearly we all deal with stress at different levels, but not everyone has the same access. Not everyone has the same social support to help, you know, when you do make that statement that I'm feeling burned out and I need to practice better self-care. Not everyone has access to the same resources. Not everyone has access to the same amount of money, same support, same family support. If you have kids, you know, you don't have the same access to daycare or someone coming to babysit, you know. So all of these things play a factor into how you respond and can come up with solutions to your own or for your own burnout. Definitely need good folks that are giving you good advice. You need positive feedback from your friends and your colleagues. You need folks that are in your circle that help to not only support your need or support your desire for better self-care, but you also need those that will keep you accountable. Those on your team and your tribe and your squad that will say, you know, what have you done for yourself lately? Or you said you were going to take more time to do this thing. Have you been doing that? And then control. You know, control in a lot of different ways in burnout can mean giving up or relinquishing some control, not being perfect all the time so that you can allow yourself some space. Control to me also means are you fortunate enough to have control over your schedule, over your time at work, over your time given to others so that you can carve out your own? So everyone, again, responds to burnout in a different way depending on your level of all of these things, okay? So we're gonna go through some tips, and then we're gonna spend probably the most time on the imposter syndrome to talk a little bit through that. But tip number one, I like to call get out of your own way, which again is different now that we're in the current situation we're in. But we still juggle 1,000 hats, maybe 1,000,000, having to deal with work, your loved ones, your social and fun time, your this and that, everyone else's schedules, the people that you take care of and you love. We wear 1,000 to 1,000,000 hats, and it's hard to figure out which ones get priority. But what I like to talk about, when I talk about or talk to a lot of my patients in clinic, I'm a family doctor, so I see patients of all different size, ages, status, etc. But I ask them when it comes to stress, are you truly doing what is making you happy? Work stress tends to be 80% of our daily stress for most of us. And in some studies has been measured as even more stressful, the amount of stress that we deal with at work, even more stressful than the stress of a loss of a loved one, divorce, your own medical disease, or some horrible medical event. Work stress has been measured number one for causing the most stress. If you're spending the most time at that thing that you're doing at work, and you're spending the most hours there per day, are you truly doing what makes you happy? If you're not, then I really talk about the importance of trying to figure out what that thing is. In our case, we went to medical school, we went to grad school, we did all these wonderful things and have all these wonderful degrees. But then now that you've been out and doing those things in medicine, does it truly make you happy? Are you doing those things that make you the most happy? So at different points in life and during your career, you have to really stop and take an assessment, do an assessment and figure out, are you truly happy doing those things? And if not, please change it. The biggest blessing is finding that which you are most passionate about that can also make you money. So if you can marry those two, you are, that's wonderful. It's miraculous when that happens. So stop doubting yourself, organize, prioritize, execute, do, and figure out what it is that you need to do to make yourself the happiest. Because if you start with yourself, then other people around you will be happier. Can you imagine being, an unhappy soldier trying to fix everyone else's problems and you're miserable yourself? You have to worry about yourself first. Okay. Michelle, please let me know if there are any questions that I need to answer for the end. Tip number 2, here's the meat, the imposter syndrome. Okay. The imposter syndrome is something that has been in existence since the 1970s, particularly 1978, the year I was born. Discovered and researched by a mother and daughter team, Clance and Imez, and they put together the definition of things that they had been noticing, particularly about women, high achieving women. This does, of course, apply to men as well, but their research had a lot to do with high achieving women in the workforce. If you can imagine the 1970s, 1980s, women were truly entering and succeeding in the workforce, getting out of the homes, exploring what it meant to be both a CEO at work and a CEO at home, and how those things were supposed to work together. But then notice that people started feeling, here this quote, part of the definition, started feeling an internal experience of intellectual phoniness. I like that phony was used in the original definition. That means a lot. But the fact that these women, we all have achieved these phenomenal things, but still at the end of the day feel phony and feel like a fake and a fraud for being as wonderful as we are, or feeling that, oh, it just must be luck. One of my best friends that graduated with me went to Duke and then went to Harvard Law, and then ended up working for the Obama administration and helping to elect him. At one point I asked, I said, how do you do all this? Like, I'm so impressed by the amount of work that you've accomplished. And she said, you know what? I still feel like on a daily basis that at some point, someone's going to figure out how much of a fraud I am. I was like, what are you talking about? Harvard graduate, first in her class, the head of all these organizations. And even she, standing alongside Obama, felt like a fake and a fraud. And that is completely ridiculous. But if you stop and think, we've thought that also about ourselves at some point, right? So that's when this whole thing started creeping in, is the 1970s, 1980s, and they did a lot of research on it. So we're going to look a little bit through some of the things that they found. Let's see. Here are the characteristics. My first slide, which we'll go back to, has what is called the imposter cycle on it. And it talks about where it is derived from. Most of it, a lot of it, unfortunately, starts with how we were raised, our upbringing. It depends on who was doing the upbringing, whether you had a tiger mom that was all in and was very intense about your success, or if you had a parent or caregiver who was a bit demeaning and demanding. All of that plays a part in how we think about ourselves and how we accomplish our goals. So we'll get into that in the next couple of slides. The need to be special or the best can color how much of an imposter you feel you are. Characteristics of the Superman and Superwoman complex, my thing, that's my niche. And the Superwoman complex has a lot to do with feeling like you have to be that perfect thing, that perfect being, that perfect person, whatever role you're playing, you have to be perfect in that. And then at the end of the day, you've sacrificed your own self-care. So then you end up in my office talking about your high blood pressure, your weight gain, your weight loss, your insomnia, your hypersomnia, whatever those things are, mental health illness, that really truly stems from you trying to be all of these things for all of these people. So this also, I was pleased to find, was part of the definition, part of the characteristics of feeling like an imposter. So we have to fix that thing so that you cannot feel as much of or like an imposter. The fear of failure clearly plays into feeling like an imposter. The denial of ability and discounting praise. How interesting. How often is it? And, I don't know if this is just an American cultural thing or a thing in general. When it comes to accepting compliments or accepting praise, we tend to downplay, or we tend to, we tend to downplay, so if someone says, you did a phenomenal job, I'm so proud of you, or you look great today, how often do you say, oh, this whole thing, or, I borrowed this from my mom, like how often is it that we downplay how wonderful we are, whether it be because of humility or, trying to be or trying to appear humble and not feel like you're bragging. To overcome the imposter syndrome, we really should do a better job of just accepting compliments and saying thank you. And when I do workshops, and if you were, we might have even done it last year at the conference, but I have this exercise, or actually pause and force people essentially to give the person next to them compliments and accept that you have the idea is to accept them and then throw a compliment back and not just say, well, no, it's not that big of a deal. It is a big deal. You are a big deal. And then lastly, your feeling of fear and your guilt about success. There's also this other phenomenon that is kind of what I like to call the survivor syndrome, where you've come out of a toxic environment, you've had a negative growing up experience, or there was some traumatic event that you survived, you came out of, you were successful with, or you have a group of friends or colleagues around you where you succeeded and they didn't. There's a potential amount of guilt that you can feel from, quote, leaving them behind. And that also plays into the imposter syndrome. So all of these things you have to stop and think about and really delve into so that you can be your best self. There are different types of imposters. So you have to figure out what type of imposter am I, so you can really fix things at the root. As you can see, here are the 5 different types that have been explored. The perfectionist, the superwoman, there it is again, / Superman. The rugged individualist, which is also called the soloist, depending on what you're reading. The expert, and the natural genius. All of us, if you're dealing with a little bit of the imposter syndrome, fit into one of these categories. And if I'm not mistaken, yeah, I have some of the definitions here, or a little description of some of them. Some of them are very self-explanatory. If you feel like the perfectionist, clearly, you feel like you should do perfect and deliver perfect performance 100% all the time, without fail. A+ work all the time without fail. And if you're any less than that, you feel like a failure. First type. Second type, the expert. You've achieved, you've been the smartest in the room your whole life. But if you fail at something or some task, or you don't know the answer to that question, then you feel like a failure because, I'm used to being the expert in the room. I didn't know this thing. I failed at this thing. I must be a failure, right? Number 3, the soloist or the rugged individualist. I'll do it all by myself. I can do it myself. Things are better if I just do them myself. I don't want to trust or put, any trust or burden on anyone else to do it. So I'm just going to do it myself. Okay. Not good. Next type, the superwoman. We talked a little bit about that. I can take care of the family and my mother and the job and make my friends happy, and it'll be fine. Even if I only get 3 hours of sleep, because I can do it all. Okay. You cannot do it all. The great mind, I think, is somewhat similar to the expert, but of course, but still being the smartest person in the room, being the genius, being the one that everyone looks to, and you're used to that. Things should just come quickly. I should know this. Why don't I know this? Clearly, I've been skimming by, and they're going to find out I'm a fraud, right? So these are the types of imposters that we can feel like. And I would imagine maybe through life, you might even switch around and feel like a couple of these at certain times, different times in life. Okay. That imposter cycle slide that I had in the very first slide. So to kind of walk through what the thinking is usually of an imposter is, let's say that let's take COVID-19, as an example. So we have this task, this big problem we have to solve. Clearly, the first thing is thinking about is getting worried, is having self-doubt, having the anxiety. How am I going to fix this? How am I going to help? How am I going to treat the patient and help this global issue? Or it can be as small as planning a birthday party for your child, having the worry and anxiety of trying to please that child and make sure that all the friends and family members are having a good time. What has happened to me, and what I'm sure has happened to a lot of you, is after we deal with the worry, we then start to either procrastinate, meaning putting it off. I know I definitely have done that. Procrastinate, wait till the last minute, or you've over prepared, meaning you've just gone overboard. Like you have obsessed about it. It is the first thing and almost the only thing that you've been dealing with, those weeks leading up to that task, which, ultimately you're able to get it done. It's messy, but you get it done. And you feel a sense of relief. You feel a sense of accomplishment, but just for a short time, because right after that comes in, the folks giving you the feedback and feeling like you've done a wonderful job. And then you immediately, again, because you're trying to either remain humble and not look like a brag and not feel conceited, you're, ignoring it or pushing back that positive feedback, saying, no, it was because of this lucky thing that happened, or no, it's because all these other people helped me, and etc. And then right back to the worry, anxiety, self-doubt, it comes right back. The feeling of relief and accomplishment is this small. We don't allow ourselves to feel good for very long, before some of the negativity comes back. And then it's time to do the next project, the next piece of work. It's time to get back to that. That's the cycle. So if you felt that, if you get caught in that, if you often find it hard to pull yourself out of that, we have to deal with it. And because we are scientists at heart, then there clearly is a scale. You know, we all like checklists and tests and scales, and there's an imposter syndrome scale that you can Google and look at online. When I do workshops and things, I will usually have a couple of questions and we'll do some worksheets, et cetera. But the higher your score, the more of an imposter you are, or the more that the imposter syndrome interferes with your personal life. So if you're into it, take a look at it, Google it, and you can do it, and it'll tell you what score you get so that you can really address those issues. All right. Things that I like to do to remind myself that I'm not going through this alone is I like to see what celebrities, celebrities, often in our culture we put here, right? They're the tip top, they're the cream of the crop. So I like to remind myself that I am no different humanly than these people that we see as being the most successful, right? So take a look at some of these quotes here. I love Tina Fey. She's one of my favorite actresses and comedians, but the middle of her sentence says here, "I'm a fraud. Oh God, they're on to me." Right? I'm a fraud. We've all felt like that in some way. If we skip down here to Maya Angelou, who is a legend, I love her quote. It says, "I have written 11 books, 11. Each time I think, uh-oh, they're going to find out. They're going to find out now. I've run a game on everybody and they're going to find me out." If Maya Angelou considered herself a fraud at some point, then clearly we have all been through it at some point. So no one is any more special than the other. We have all had these feelings of doubt, and it's okay. We just have to figure out how to feel better about it and work our way through it so it doesn't get in the way of our happiness. Okay? Again, clearly, the reality is we know much more than we give ourselves credit for, and we've achieved much more on our own because of our wonderfulness. We've achieved much more than we give ourselves credit for. Give yourselves some credit, okay? Give yourself some credit. Do you all remember those Myers-Briggs that we did probably in college, medical school, residency, etc.? Go back to it. Because I think that knowing the personality type, knowing your own personality type, helps you to understand the way that you think better. I think that it changes as your phases of life change. So my personality now as a working mom and wife, clearly, it may not differ, tremendously because I am the person I am, but the personality that I have as a working mom and wife and entrepreneur is probably much different than it was when I was an 18-year-old college student. And so I think doing the Myers-Briggs, even if it's a very short version of it online, helps you to figure out what your intuition is, how you respond to stress, how you interact with other people, what your love languages are. During my premarital counseling before I got married 10 years ago, we read the 5 love languages and figured out how I receive affection and how my husband receives affection. I think it's also important to know what the love languages and what the personalities are of your loved ones and your working colleagues, because then you can communicate better. So if you haven't done it in a while, I implore you to do it. Here are 4 kind of quick and easy questions that you can do at home. I've been pretty true to my ENFP, meaning, enthusiastic, creative, spontaneous, optimistic. I'm less spontaneous now that I'm older and have kids to worry about and all that. I definitely am a little bit more of a planner nowadays, but I still try to be enthusiastic and creative in how I work, how I interact with my loved ones, etc. So take a look at this. This is another quick activity you can do today, just to kind of focus on if you've changed, if your love language has changed, if the way that you react to stress has changed, and it can be very helpful. Okay. Another one is the 4-question personality quiz. It's similar to this. When I'm in workshops, we go through this. You can Google the 4-question personality quiz, and it's very, it's kind of quick and dirty and similar to the previous slide, the quick questionnaire. Instead of like the true Myers-Briggs, which is like sheets and sheets of questions you have to answer. All right, so now what? Now what do we do? So we figured out that we're in our own way. We figured out that we're probably a little bit of the Superwoman, Superman, and we figured out that we're probably an imposter. So what are we gonna do, right? First thing to do is accept it, admit it, right? Come to terms with this, yourself, that you're dealing with the same stuff that plenty of folks are dealing with. But then you want to focus on how to make yourself feel more confident, remind yourself of your own self-worth, feel more valued, so that you can make better decisions and you can attack problems better and come up with ways to make your life happier. When I'm in workshops, and we probably did this too last year when I was in Chicago for the conference, but I teach folks that haven't done things with me before, the pose, and I like to call it the Superwoman pose. I think it's actually called the Wonder Woman pose. But literally it's standing up with your chest out and your chin up, with your arms on your hips, your fists on your hips, standing in a pose. That feels very silly, but literally it can increase your testosterone level. It decreases your cortisol and increases your confidence. If you do that, if you do the pose, first thing in the morning, looking at yourself in the mirror, or right before you go see that patient, or right before you go downstairs to deal with your children who don't want to do their homeschooling work, that will increase your energy level. It will increase your testosterone. It will give you more of an oomph, and hopefully you'll be able to attack that issue, that problem a little bit better. Before you walk into the boardroom and ask for that raise, before you get on to that conference, that webinar, leading a topic, do that, and hopefully that'll make you feel a little bit better. Positive self-talk is key. And social media is both a blessing and a curse because it has a lot of messages that either you're putting out and you're allowing in. You want to make sure that a lot of that stuff is positive. You want to make sure that you're speaking life and speaking positive things, because it makes a difference. It makes a difference in your mentality and your self-worth and your energy level to say good things about yourself. Okay. Here's that learning how to accept and believe compliments. So you should practice today. Whatever loved one you have, elbow bumping today, or you're live chatting with someone online. But if you get a compliment, if you receive a compliment on how cute you look, how that meal that you prepared looks wonderful, and how that document or that talk that you gave was great, accept it. Accept it. Thank you. I appreciate that. Don't accept it with the, I did this, 5 years ago, so it was easy to put together. No, accept it and then give a compliment back. It makes a difference. If you're, you like old school pen and paper and you like to write things down in your journal, in your diary, make a strength list. Remind yourself how wonderful you are. What I did, especially again with this whole COVID-19 thing, what I did, not necessarily about myself, but about my life, even with the drama that we're going through right now, I both wrote and I did it on Instagram. I have my Instagram page. I have, if you're not as familiar with Instagram stories can be, where you can put little memes or put up little comments or do a poll, a survey. You can do things like that on Instagram stories. And what I did earlier this week was one I called a hashtag the bright side. And what it was I told people what I thought, how we could make this situation into a positive one, or just reminding ourselves the bright side of what's going on now, all this quarantining that we're having to do. So my first one was, we're going to save gas money because we're not driving as much. Or I think the other one was air pollution. We're going to have less air pollution because we're not driving as much as we used to. And then I asked people to put one themselves. So I have a collection of what folks put as the bright side, and I saved it on my Instagram. But do that for yourself. Remind yourself about all the wonderful things and positive things going on in your life. Tell yourself if you're feeling some signs of depression or feeling some really sad thoughts right now because of what we're going through. Remind yourself of the bright side. Remind yourself of hopefully you're being able to spend more time with your family and loved ones. more time to complete some home projects that you didn't have to do before. Another one for me is getting some laundry done that I usually don't have time to sit and do. Cleaning up the girls' room, or cooking at home, or remind yourselves of those positive things so that you can focus more on the positive. Simply remind yourself how great you are. Realize that perfection is not realistic for anyone, and ask for help. Asking for help was another big one that I had to another hurdle that I had to get over, because again, being a woman in medicine, being a doctor, we are often taught that we can do a lot of these things for ourselves and by ourselves. And, we get a little bit of the team work ethic. We're in residency and we operate with a team. But if you're in private practice, or you are a solo hospitalist, et cetera, and you do your things, do your own things for yourself, it's hard to realize that you need help, and it's hard to ask for help. Because you don't want to feel like you're giving anyone extra burden. You don't want people, in some instances, to feel like you can't handle it, so it's hard to ask for help. I now probably ask for help too much. If you're my Facebook friend, you probably have seen my hashtag ask Facebook post, where it's like, hashtag ask Facebook, can someone run to the post office for me today? Or we're looking for a babysitter, from 6 to 8, someone please, let me know if you're available. I'm always asking. The good thing is, thankfully, I have those friends and family and Facebook friends that are willing to help. They're willing to do a favor. They're willing to barter. They're willing to collaborate. Ask for help, because there are likely people there that they're waiting to be on your team to help you. And so don't feel less than, don't feel like a failure if you're asking for someone to help you. Okay. Michelle, I'm just checking the clock and looking and making sure we're doing all right. And I see you, Malcolm. Good to see you. Tip number 3, there is no time like the present. Stop procrastinating. I'm speaking to myself. Again, because we're spending a little bit more time at home now with this, the quarantine and all of this social distancing that we're doing. Hopefully it's a little bit easier to work on those things. So when you have that task, going back to the imposter cycle, have that task. Hopefully there is less anxiety and less self-doubt associated with it, because we have a little bit more time. So stop procrastinating. When we get back to quote normal life, just remember that, there's no time like the present. If there is a project, a book that you want to write, a business that you want to start, a life goal that you're trying to accomplish, stop waiting for the perfect moment, because there is no perfect moment. Okay. Step out on faith. I'm very, very faith-filled and faith-based. And so I'm always, especially now that I've stepped out on faith, or was forced into some scary situations that we overcame, like going from a hospital practice into a private practice when none of us had any business experience. Now that I've accomplished those things, and probably with maturity and growing up, now I'm definitely not as afraid to try something new. The whole speaking thing, when I went into medical school and started, the practice, etc., I never thought that I wanted to write books and publish and become a speaker, mostly because I hated public speaking. I'd done it, and I had done it when I was supposed to do it, but I did not love it. Now that I've been doing it, and I do it fairly regularly, now I'm not as fearful. So it's become fun and a great side gig, a way to make money outside of the office. So just jump. If you fail, at least you tried. You don't want to have regrets at the end of the day and say, I really wish I should have tried, I wish I would have done that. I should have tried that. I should have, started that business. I should have written that book. I should have, ended that toxic relationship. Do it. If you fail, if it doesn't work, always go back to plan B, C, or D. But try it. You might succeed. Build your toolkit. I created or modified this stress flower that I got from cortisol.com. Essentially, it's a way to pick and choose what you're going to focus on for that moment, that week, that day that you have a lot of stress. What is that thing that you're going to pull out of your toolkit that's going to make you feel better? So this is a flower that you can, color and write. You can journal or diary, draw it out yourself, but come up with those things that work for you when you're having times of stress, when you're feeling like an imposter. What makes you feel better? For me, daily music is a must. I have to have good music around me. I have playlists for different moods. It really makes a difference. That and nature, or just being outside, period. It doesn't even have to be in the woods or hiking. Just being outside in the sunshine. I'm sitting in front of a window right now looking out. The sun's out. It's a wonderful spring day. Those two things are a daily must for me, or my mood, plummets. For you, it might be making sure you're getting your exercise or doing your therapy. With our self-quarantining, things are virtual now, so you can talk to your therapist and counselor, hopefully online. Instead of going to the gym because of what's happening, you can do your own yoga. You can look on YouTube and find some exercise classes. And a lot of my exercise colleagues on Facebook are doing free Facebook Lives where they're walking you through exercise routines. So get what you need. Really focus on one or two things, either on a daily basis, and then switch it up. If you hadn't gotten a massage in a while, or you haven't done your meditation in a while, go back to those things that make you feel good. Saying no. Wow. This is a biggie. If you are an expert in saying no, I applaud you. I'm still working on this. I'm getting a little bit better, both with my patients and with loved ones, with setting boundaries. Only you get to choose how you make use of your time, ultimately, and only you get to choose how people treat you. So you have to be in control of that. Knowing your self-worth, knowing what you can and can't do, what you have time and energy to do, not to do, how much money and resources you have to give. Only you can do that. So you have to practice saying no more. You also should practice saying no as a complete sentence. Because when I first started doing a lot of this and saying no, the usual statement right after would be because, or no, but, no. Dr. Swiner, do you want to add on 5 more patients to your schedule and et cetera? No. In my mind, I'm saying because I have to go get my kids and because this thing is happening and I'd already promised hubby I was going to be home at such and such time. No. And it's okay. It's okay. It will teach people what's important to you and how important your time is to you and what you will accept or not accept. So it's okay. Practice saying no. I have to do it more with my children. They're the hardest. Mom, can I watch? No. It's a hard one. All right, frenemies. Ooh. And again, we're social distancing. So probably a little bit easier now to not have to deal with people that you don't necessarily want to deal with. But, quote, in normal life, there are some friendships, some relationships, some romantic relationships, some friendships that probably need to be ended, or at the very least, more boundaries have to be set for, because they toxic ones and negative ones are draining. They're draining emotionally. They're probably draining financially. They're draining socially. So be aware of how you feel when you interact with certain people. The young folks call it the vibe, their energy. Be aware of that. I definitely have taken stock into how does it make me feel after I've spent some time with this person, or I've had this conversation with this patient, or, hopefully you have control over your schedule, over your patient panel, where you can say, I don't think that relationship, this patient-doctor relationship is working out the best. I don't feel like you're getting what you need. Maybe another physician would be better for you. I think it's okay to say that, especially if that patient or that person has been belligerent, has been demeaning and not nice. Hopefully you have the control if you're at work or that coworker, that supervisor. Hopefully you have the control and the voice enough to say, I don't think this working relationship is working for either of us, and so we should find a different way to either address these issues or find different folks to work with, work for, work by, etc. It's okay to say that, because you want to surround yourself with as much positivity, as much love as possible, especially during these times. So if those relationships happen to be blood, mother, aunt, grandmother, uncle, father, same deal. You know, there are some relatives that I've had to love from afar, love from a distance, because again, the interactions that we have don't necessarily feel positive, and they don't feel reciprocated. They feel one-sided, and that's okay. You can still love someone and not like the interactions that you have with them. You are in control of that. Okay. All right. Last one, I believe, talks a little bit more about the work space, which again, some of us may not even be in right now because of the quarantining and social distancing. But if you're still working from home, or once you get back to your usual work hours, if you're not enjoying your job, please change it. Because as I mentioned earlier, work stress is the number one stress that we deal with. And it's probably, we spend the most time at work during the weekdays. So please figure out what your happiest environment would be. Is it that you want to work part-time? Is it that you want to stop taking call? Is it that you want to do, if you're in primary care, do you not want to do physical exams like your colleagues do those? Do you want to structure your schedule differently so you have a longer lunch hour? With COVID-19 going on, and actually what I did 2 years prior to this happening was I started doing telemedicine so that I could do medicine from home and be at home more with my family. Working from home definitely makes me happier. So if you can do that, if you want to change your career altogether and not work in medicine, you get to choose that. And hopefully you can find that passion project that also makes you money so that you can sustain the quality of life that you want. So again, address job burnout, even if that means leaving that job, so that you can be happier in general. Okay. I think this, I was going to try to find that. Well, don't worry about it. I was going to say this last slide here was a slide that I had that showed, I'm trying to move my face here so I can show you this one. I can show you this real quick. I pulled it here. Hold on, I'm gonna find it for you. It's an important slide to look at. Hope you guys are doing okay. I feel like I'm talking your head off. Here it is. All right. Workaholism, well-being, burnout. We all deal with it. Make sure that these things have not become overwhelming. You want your workaholism to be balanced by your personal feeling of well-being. You really have to take stock in how much energy, time, effort you're putting into your job, and is it giving you back what you need? Okay, take stock in that. All right, let's see. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. I think I'm pretty much done. I think, in my publishing job, I've published a couple of volumes of a book called Thinking About Quitting Medicine. It literally talks about these things that we've been talking about, and it reminds medical providers that it's okay, that you are not alone. We all have dealt with some of these issues. We've all dealt with a little bit of the imposter syndrome, with burnout, with problems with work-life integration. I like to tell the success stories. So the books that I've written are about different ways that different medical and dental and psychology providers have figured out what works best for them, whether it was staying in medicine, staying in their field, or doing something completely different. Just know that there are ways out. You don't have to feel stuck is key. Okay. Here's a summary of all the tips that we went through. Remind yourself of what is important and leave that horrible situation or that horrible job if it is not serving you well. You deserve it. You deserve it. And again, If no one has told you today, I appreciate you. I appreciate the work that you have all done, particularly in this time of crisis. I think that you are wonderful, wonderful providers, and you deserve to give yourself a break. So please take some time for you today and these next couple of weeks as we care for the world. Okay. All right. That is pretty much it. Please don't hesitate to contact me. I'm at Doc Swiner on most social media pages. Here's a free ebook if you want to download that. I'll send that to you too. So please let me know if you need my help. Okay. Thanks.
How did you get into the Superwoman issue and this whole process of teaching about this feeling of fraud, this feeling of inadequacy, really?
Yep, because I went through it myself, and I'm still going through it. So, was working in private, working in private practice, married, had my first child, and after coming back from maternity leave, I literally worked myself, I passed out. I just hit the floor at work. And that, hitting the floor, hitting bottom, will definitely bring some things to light. It will show you that you're doing too much, that you're not sleeping enough, that you're not eating right, you're not exercising enough. And my father was the one actually that brought to my attention an article in Newsweek called "The Working Woman." And it talked a little bit about the Superwoman complex and how it was becoming so prevalent nowadays, or since the 1980s to now. And it really forced me, of course, with, sitting down and talking to my husband about our plans and my schedule, et cetera. It forced me to really deal with this feeling of trying to be perfect for everyone, and figuring out how I wanted to address that. So I started talking more to my patients about it, both men and women, Superman, Superwomen. And then I was, I felt encouraged to write about it because I wanted to share it with folks even outside of my clinic, because it is associated with the amount of so much stress that we deal with. And if we dealt with that stress and that feeling of perfectionism, it would help the medical and mental health issues that, we treat in the office if we just dealt with those things at the root. So that's how I got into it.
Interesting. For all our audience, you can ask your questions. There's a little Q&A thing down at the bottom of your screen.
So Deanna asks, if you worked for an organization, what would you need as a physician in terms of support and resources to help minimize burnout? That is a great question. So if you didn't necessarily have control over your schedule and resources, what would you need to help minimize? So I think I mentioned some at the very end, we in medicine are taught to be superwoman, supermen, handle all the problems, etc. Sometimes we're not given the credit or the reimbursement or revenue that we deserve. If you feel, empowered enough, look at your revenue and your reimbursement. Would it make you feel better to make more money than you're making currently? Do you deserve to be reimbursed better? Are there ways that maybe your billing and coding department can come in and teach you how to code better, to code more effectively, to code efficiently? The other thing that I did that, again, so I co-own my practice, so I have more control over it, but I think more organizations now are looking into scribes. Having a scribe was tremendous for me and is tremendous for me because I can actually spend more time. I've had a scribe now for about 3 years. And yes, it can be done in primary care because the cost that you spend, the $10 to $12 an hour, $10 to $15 an hour for a scribe, you actually recover because you're able to see more patients, or you're able to spend more time on billing and coding appropriately. But it makes a difference in terms of the amount of time that we spend with paperwork, with doing notes, with taking work home. It definitely makes a difference. So I think that's one big way that you could. So we talked about asking for better reimbursement and revenue, a scribe, and then, if you can cut back on your hours, if you can ask to be part-time, if you can ask to not work weekends, that also improves burnout because you can spend more time at home recovering and resting. So those are some things I would start with, Deanna.
How long did it take you to train your scribe?
The first scribe I started with, she was a post-bac student. So she already had some understanding of medicine. She had taken some grad school classes, et cetera. So it really did not take, I mean, it took her probably less than a couple of weeks to look at the notes that I've already previously written and to kind of learn the way that I communicate and the way that I transcribe my notes. So if you have templates that you work with your notes, it should not take very long at all for them to learn, you know, how you usually structure your physical exam note, how you structure your diabetes follow-up note. It should not take them longer than a week, especially if you work with templates on your EMR to learn.
Well, thank you, Nicole, for a memorable hour.
You're welcome.
To our webinar guests, please help us by completing a brief survey. We want to know how you experienced the Coalition webinar. Mark your calendars for Friday, April 17th, when Dr. Wayne Sotile will talk to us about the thriving physician. Also look in your email. We have a newly re-envisioned newsletter coming out, and Michael Brown, Lois Swisher, and Liz Farron from the Coalition are leading the production team, and I know they would love to get your feedback and stories of your own that you'd like to share with your Coalition colleagues. Also, I want to give a shout out to our Coalition sponsors, Advent Health, and our production staff, Michelle Vasquez, who did double duty today. Thank you, Michelle, and Stephanie Feliciano. And thanks to you, our audience, too. Meanwhile, try to avoid that nasty little virus out there. Wash your hands, don't touch your face, and go with the wisdom of St. Paul, who encouraged us to live a life worthy of the calling you've received. Be completely humble and gentle, be patient, bearing with one another in love. Goodbye until next time.